Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Pfeiffer. I'm the host of Conversations on Retail from mostly sunny Northwest Arkansas. It's a beautiful summer day, and we are here today with Bill Kirk, the co-founder and CEO of Weather Trends International. Bill, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. So you and I know we've been in the same place multiple times over the course of my career when you passed through Northwest Arkansas, but I don't know that we've ever shaken hands. And so this is kind of an exciting opportunity for me because I've had an opportunity over those years to kind of study your business from afar in terms of predictive analytics. And it's always been a little bit fascinating, but I'm excited today to learn more about your business. And before we kind of dig into background, I'd love for you to kind of give just your elevator pitch for what is Weather Trends International. What is it today?
Okay, well, we do what's impossible, right? We predict the weather a year ahead. And I say the weather, we predict sensible metrics, temperature, rainfall, and snowfall by day or week, a year ahead everywhere on Earth. So we're going out 52 weeks, every mile on Earth. So it's about 32 million miles. But beyond just predicting the weather, if you can get the weather right using statistics and climate cycles, then can you predict other outcomes? Can you predict sales and commodity prices and stock prices? So really that's the goal, is to predict both the weather, correlate it to past things, whether that's short sales or, beverage sales or stock prices, and then predict that outcome a year ahead by week everywhere on Earth. So really that's the goal, is to, if you can predict that, then you can help businesses with how much inventory, where to allocate it, promote it, advertise it, right? Get all that right, and everybody's happy.
Yeah. And by the way, forgive me for skipping over this. The folks that have joined us, the reason you've been invited is because I'd love for you to be a part of this conversation. If you've got questions for Bill, use the Q&A button within Zoom and begin submitting your questions. And I've got a couple of pages that I've written out myself, but again, I'd love for y'all to be a part of this conversation. So Bill, I understand that the story of Weather Trends actually goes back to being a 7-year-old living in Hawaii, and you kind of had that big kind of first real encounter with weather that got your attention. I'd love to kind of hear that story.
Yeah, I won't go back to when I was 2, right? No,
Okay.
So I grew up in Kaneohe, Hawaii, base of the Ko'ola Mountains. We averaged about 100 inches of rain every year. So it was a tropical rainforest, if you will. But one storm in particular, again, south of 10 years old, it lasted for like 7-8 days, 50-mile-an-hour winds for 7-8 days, and about 100 inches of rain in a week, right? So old warehouse, 3-story warehouse, and the walls were caving in, and the guys were trying to jimmy the walls. So it was just, as a young kid, fascinating event, kind of scary in some regards, but it really got me interested in science, math, and predicting outcomes, right? So it was just a very early age. And that's, if you ask any meteorologist, they'll tell you it was some hurricane or flood or typhoon or whatever that got them excited about weather and science. So that's what did it.
Yeah. Now, you were a math and Bible scholar in school. What created and kind of drove that passion in you then to excel in those areas?
Well, in Hawaii, back in the day, so I'm dating myself, back in the 70s, as a young kid growing up in Hawaii, the school system was a little left to be desired, if you will. So you blessed that my parents could afford to put me in private school as a young kid. And, so we, the really only private schools were, Christian schools. And again, just blessed to have a great upbringing, and, got very interested in science and math very early on. And kind of weird, right? Bible scholar, science brain, right? So left, right brain. But again, just it was a great experience. Moved from Hawaii when I was 16, joined the military some years later. So again, it was just a great experience of, I would never want to live there anymore. It's just, too confining. Again, what I drive to work sometimes is around the whole island in, about an hour. So great place to grow up, but that's
yeah.
Great
Well,
memory.
and I was gonna ask you what caused you to leave Hawaii to go end up at Rutgers University in New Jersey. What drove what kind of
I
drove
always say
that
there's
decision?
divine intervention in our lives, right? I'm a firm believer in that. My dad died when I was 13, and my mom remarried a Marine, and he said on their honeymoon, "Hey kids, how would you like to move to Quantico, Virginia?" And I'm like, me and my sister sound like a stereo, like, "Where's Virginia?" Like, no, we don't want to go to Virginia, but we did. And blessed, again, that's how I stumbled on Rutgers, years later for college. And again, just, paths were, steered in a certain direction. And again, I just, again, can't complain about anything, in that regard.
For sure. And your relationship with the Air Force began at what point during your college experience?
ROTC. So my stepdad was a Marine. He was a
Yeah.
F4 fighter pilot, if you will. And his claim to fame was he was Captain Kirk, right? And flew F4s. And so he landed on the Enterprise. And so, I don't know, he just said, hey, the weather meteorologists are really needed at the Air Force. Why don't you go and talk to the colonel at the Air Force ROTC? And I had back in the day had nice long Sean Cassidy hair, 70s style hair, right? The first thing the colonel says is, young man, you need a haircut. So I said, okay, this meeting's over. But I gave it a chance. I loved Air Force ROTC. It was great at Rutgers. Went on to manage both Rutgers and Princeton's ROTC programs for my senior year in high school or college, and just blessed in that regard. And again, did really well in that regard, and was kind of handpicked by MacDill Air Force Base, Central Command, if you will. And most of my buddies were going to wait a year to get their assignments, and I got my assignment within about a month. So again, off to Tampa, MacDill Air Force Base. And again, that was just Schwarzkopf, got knighted by the Queen, Desert Storm was there, you name it. We had it there at MacDill, Space Shuttle Columbia. It was just a great experience, and really got me, really kind of the catalyst for really get me to think even further into statistical climate science, as opposed to, I was trained at Rutgers as a physicist, so physical, meteorology, dynamics, fluid dynamics. So just great to get that military background of, nope, you make a forecast, don't change your mind. And I'm like, well, that's counter to everything we've been taught at Rutgers. So no, it was a great experience.
So broadcast meteorology was never part of your plan.
Not entirely, no. Yeah, no, again, it was a passion. Initially I thought I was going to be a minister going to Wheaton College, but Wheaton College had other ideas. Long lost cousin was at Rutgers oceanography, and I didn't even know we had a relative there. And so here I think I'm going to go, to Wheaton College in Illinois. And 3 months later, I'm at Rutgers, so again, it was just, it was what I was meant to be, so here I am predicting the weather and sales some 32 years later.
Yeah. So talk about, because I want to get to weather trends and what you all do, and especially kind of what you're seeing into the fourth quarter of this year. But kind of talk us through the path that led you, between your 4 years in the Air Force after you graduated from college to Weather Trends International, which you've been doing for the last 15 years plus. What was kind of that in between? What did that look like career wise?
Well, again, so I got out of the Air Force, after 4 years, I went to Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska, where I was in charge of Air Force Global Weather Central's, a lot of their products, again, millions of products produced at the, back in the early 90s. The next assignment was going to probably be Korea or Japan, and I got to thinking that I really want to, I wanted to serve my country. That was a big thing, so I did my 4 years, and then it was really kind of the catalyst to get out, start my own company. And I say I was doing it, as a two-man band, right? You know how that is, right? It's, it was just me and another guy, and we started a company and competing with the AccuWeathers back in the early 90s. And it was tough, right? First business, a lot of lessons learned. Didn't end so well. Just joined some other companies in my past, and then really just got to think, what better way, who could be, back in the day, I was helping companies like ski resorts and newspapers and agricultural entities. And I'm like, who could better use long range business intelligence than the first name that came to mind was Walmart. Right. So how can Walmart, that has millions of products, got to plan all these products a year ahead, allocate all this stuff, right? I mean, how could they do that better? And that was really kind of the catalyst of let's start to really predict that volume, those sales. And if I can do that accurately, then again, we thought we could break into that retail supply side space rather than the traditional agriculture, newspapers, the TV weather stuff that everybody else was doing back in the 2000s. So again, we knocked on Walmart's door. I guess the Weather Channel was walking out, because one of the things Walmart said back in 2002 to us was, now, when you make your forecast, you don't change your mind, do you? And we're like, no, we use statistics and cycles. And once we issue that forecast, the statistical process is not going to change. So what generated that forecast isn't going to change. And they said, good, because the other guys that just walked out changed their forecast all the time. So it was really kind of the catalyst of, we had to prove it to them first. But 3 months later, after we hit a flood, we hit a heat wave, they made a few $million bucks. Walmart was the first client. So, and then it was just, I joked that I had my next client was Anheuser-Busch, and they asked me, who are your clients? I said, well, Walmart. Now let me tell you what they're doing over there. Right. And Anheuser-Busch, after that, they said, I think my next client was Johnson & Johnson, so who are your clients? Like Anheuser-Busch. Now let me tell you what they're doing with beer at Walmart and blah, blah, blah. And we really didn't have a lot of clients, but it was just kind of a blessing, right? They always say a good name, Walmart, good name.
It's so interesting you say that, because I've had the conversation 100 times with people that are reluctant to start with Walmart, and it is a swing for the fences, right? I mean, a no is a huge no, but a yes is a halo effect creates a halo effect that you can then take to every other conversation, and you've got instant credibility because you've served the best and you've learned at the feet of the best. So what an amazing call. So Walmart was your first customer or first major customer?
Well, I don't know. I think first major customer. Again, we were in the middle of being acquired by another company at that time frame. So we had Anheuser-Busch was prototyping it. Pepsi was prototyping what we were doing. Walmart, again, we gave them 3 months of summer forecast. Again, we literally looked like two guys in a garage back in the day. But we joined another much bigger company called Surveillance Data Inc., which today is called Equivia, a multi-billion-dollar company. So we were part of them for few years. And that was a blessing too. Again, so we were, few guys and gals, statisticians, but we were part of a bigger company that gave us the bandwidth to, when Walmart said, hey, we want you to help us in the UK or China or wherever Walmart was going. We're like, yep, we can do that. So really Walmart was actually the catalyst for us to getting thinking globally. It's how we ultimately broke away from Equivia some 13 years ago and got venture capital money to really go global. So today it's, because of Walmart, we are doing every mile on Earth. So that's, 32 million spots, 196 countries, right? Again, so they got us, they helped us thinking differently. Just what we do today.
So again, at the very beginning, it was you and a partner, and you were crunching the numbers and building the forecast and doing the selling and managing the account relationships. I mean, is that right? And at what point did a 2-person operation become a 3 and then a 4 and then a 5? And what did the story look like?
What I've always learned in the military too is just the acronym KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid. We've always been focusing on anything we do, we're going to automate it, right? I mean, so we've always been lean in that capacity. We're not 500 people or 800 people like AccuWeather. We're never going to be that big in terms of manpower. We don't have to be. So really it was us and a few statisticians, a couple meteorologists back in the day in the early 2000s, 2002, 2006 timeframe. And then broke away in 2006 and got venture capital money, about $5 million in venture capital money, and really started hiring the PhDs, the mathematicians, the meteorologists, the salespeople, right? I mean, really just trying to make a business, if you will. So again, in every step of the way, me as a CEO, I'm more techie, in that regard. I was always focused on the technology side of the business rather than the sales side of the business. So it was always innovating. That was our key. That anytime a client wanted something, today we produce hundreds of thousands of retail sales planners for everything, 10,000 seasonal categories, right? And we're updating those things 3-4 times a year for all our clients. Right now, I'm sure all our clients down in Bentonville are getting probably their winter, early spring next year, 2022 sales planners, right? So but again, they're generating hundreds of thousands of these, for, 100 companies there in Bentonville. In the old days, we had to do that manually. That would be impossible today. So today, thank goodness, I always say the other blessing in the regard along the journey was Amazon. Amazon Web Services allow us to do what we do. Without their few thousand servers that we'd have to use, I could never afford that. It'd be $100 million in servers alone just to do what we do. So because Amazon, 10 years ago, made computing cheap, right? So that allowed us to do what we do today and scale it.
In what other ways, and this, I feel kind of almost ignorant asking this question because there's so many things that would be obvious, but maybe some of the less obvious. I mean, processing power and cloud storage and what are some of the other ways that the business has changed the most profoundly that maybe we wouldn't consider? And I'm especially interested in hearing you talk about, the role of artificial intelligence and all these different sources of data that's making your predictive analytics more and more reliable.
The neat thing is that, really from a very early on, even, 32 years ago, when I first dabbled with this in the Air Force, statistics are great. It's really hard to refute. I give an example of March. When March in the Northeast has been one standard deviation above average, a hot March in the Northeast, what happens next year? Over the last 125 years, guess what? There's a 94% chance, statistically, that the next year's cold and snowy. So if I've just had a record hot March since, say, 2016, and my statistics say when that happens, I've triggered a statistics that next year is going to be cold and snowy with a 94% confidence of history. There's always the 6% chance that it could be wrong, but there's a 94% chance it's going to be right. Well, guess what happened in 2017? The coldest, snowiest in 21 years. That's what we said. Physics and artificial intelligence and computer modeling and weather meteorology as of February of 2017 said March was going to be another record hot March. And it was for the first 2 days. And then the bottom fell out and it was epically cold and 2 feet of snow, right? So statistics, usually I always say the earth is a system in balance. Once you figure out those, now I say that's the easy step. That's one of trillions upon trillions times a billion statistics that we would look at. So again, if it wasn't for the fact of massive computing, there's no way we could do what we do today.
Yeah.
It'd be impossible. So again,
and forgive me if I missed this, but in terms of market coverage, your Weather Trends International, how many different countries are you currently working in?
Well, we forecast for every, like I said, every mile on Earth. So that's every spot on Earth. But we have clients probably in about 25 countries at this point. Now, again, I'll caveat, like a Coca-Cola International has our sales forecast for Coke and LinkedIn and all the different types of products that, Coke would sell in every country except 2, Iran and North Korea. So go figure, right?
Yeah.
Again, so they have a sales forecast in every single country, but clients in countries, I mean, we have Mercedes-Benz in Germany, a lot of European, UK clients. Again, so they're pretty much scattered across Europe, Canada, Home Depot, Canada, US. But it's the 80-20 rule. About 75% of our clients are in the US.
How much of your time are you spending developing forecasts, and then how much of your time are you spending helping these companies understand what they mean and how to make those insights actionable?
The neat thing, again, so with the scale of Amazon, we are 100% automated. Everything we do is automated. So there's no human in it. And that's very important. It's a very big differentiator between us and AccuWeather and IBM. Most meteorologists think they're smarter than everyone else, right? That just, we think we're smart scientists, and we are. But you have the problem in meteorology today that I see is that, we love big storms. We love snowstorms. We love cold and hurricanes, right? So you have this bias in the science of just over forecasting, right? There's just this kind of innate in the science, if you will, that, we're going to over forecast snowstorms. We're going to over forecast things. So what we did with the statistical cycles is that, look, March, the statistics say it's going to be 94% chance it's cold and snowy. Don't deviate from the statistics. It's highly confidence. We on top of that, we layer in the El Niños, La Niñas, PDOs, all these other oceanic cycles, that tell you something. When the ocean gets cold, the weather usually has drought, right? So we're having drought in the US and Brazil. That was a common climate cycle, right? Married in with the statistics. So what we've done is just by automating it, we don't have to, the dangerous is when I actually make my gut feel. When my gut feel says it's going to do this, you're usually wrong, right? So just we let the science and the statistics run and we go with it. Now it's going to be right 80 to 90% of the time, and I say that by week. We've actually got all the audits that show that our year ahead forecast is more accurate than a week 2 short range forecast. So typically our year ahead forecast might have 2 to 5 degree error in it on a daily year ahead basis. The industry's error, this is from an auditing firm that audits everybody, us included. So on a week 1 forecast, you may not know this, but your average error in your forecast is 4.6 degrees. So whatever you're hearing for this week, on average for this week, they're going to be off by 4.6. Our year ahead's off by 2 to 5, right? So we're almost as good as that. We're not always, but a week 2 forecast has error of 6.9 degrees. That's IBM, AccuWeather, us, everybody. So I always say physics really can't get it right. It just can't. It's a moving target. It's fluid. It's right. So that's the problem in our space. Really, our biggest hurdle is skepticism, right? That my weatherman can't get next week right. How on earth can you get next year right? Well, because statistics trump physics.
Yeah. So broadly speaking, what's your outlook for the fourth quarter, and then maybe touch on a couple of categories just for fun.
Sure. Yeah. So I think our big headlines that we're pretty. I'm willing to give away the vague stuff because again, our value is telling explicitly a Walmart supplier every week, every store, you're up 2%, down 5%, up 20%, down 50% by store. That's our goal. The big themes this year is going to be drought with hurricanes, right? So we think the drought is going to be pretty epic. It continues through this summer, and we think it's an epic hurricane season, particularly September, October, mid-September, mid-October. We had some claim to fame with Walmart back in 2005. Gordy Erickson, senior VP at the time, we predicted an epic hurricane season for the North Central Gulf, and he actually staged inventory. We didn't know he did this. Found out years later, but he had all the suppliers get stuff on pallets months, almost a year in advance for Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. And he planned that in 2004 because we were talking about an epic hurricane season for the North Central Gulf. This year we have it for Florida, right? So if you're ever going to stage something this year, Florida's the spot to kind of stage your storm stuff. Q4, November through January, we have it the coldest in 7 years. So this is a big change. We've had a couple really hot, dryish Q4s, November, December, January. And the good news is we have a really cold November. In fact, we've got some days there nationally where we always call this thing the power of 1 degree. So it's the influence of 1 degree of temperature change on seasonal sales. So, and this is having analyzed tens of thousands of seasonal categories, but every degree colder in the fall, Q4, there's about a 1% increase in soup sales. If it's 10 degrees colder, 10% increase in soup sales. If it's jeans, about 2% move for every degree. So if it's 10 degrees colder, 20% increase in jean sales. Coffee, big ones are like car batteries, up 7% for every degree. So if it's 10 degrees colder, you're up 70% in auto batteries because they fail in cold weather. And the most volatile category we've ever found, at least statistically, was electric blankets. About a 24% move for every degree colder. So we have some days in November where there's 10, 15 degrees colder year on year. Again, coldest in 7 years for that quarter. You're going to see some big, 50, 70%, moves. So again, just do that math. If it's the weeks leading up to Black Friday, I know that's important for a lot of retailers. It's always good when you get really good cold in November because you're selling all that cold gear at full price, full margin, right? Maybe not Walmart as much, discounting, but a lot of retailers, like if product's not moving in November, what do? It's big markdowns by December. If it's not moving by December, big markdowns, huge markdowns for January. So that early cold in November is really good. We're going to full product, full price. December, we have pretty cold as well, but we have it very dry, though, 2-3 weeks around Christmas. So dry is good for store traffic. So again, we kind of have this holy grail. And then January, we've got it cold and very snowy in January. So January would be a good clearance month. So the good news, you're going to sell full product price, full margins, great Christmas holiday shopping season, good store traffic weather, and then clearing all that emergence, excess, what little inventory they may have over by January. So just kind of that perfect scenario, if you will, for Q4. So again, we're very bullish that it's one of the best they've seen in maybe 7 years.
Yeah. Well, we need it, right?
Yeah. After COVID.
Again, broadly speaking, and in the context of CPG, what's your sweet spot? How you mentioned Coca-Cola and Anheuser-Busch and some of these big companies, but at what point in terms of volume, maybe it's not a fair question, but what would be your kind of your 80-20 where you're doing the most business within the supplier community?
Really, again, we have several dozen retailers, the AutoZones and Kohl's and Targets of the world, but it's really the supply side, right, folks? So in fact, Walmart, we kind of shifted our focus. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we actually shifted where we were going to supply Walmart suppliers a sales forecast that would support Walmart, right? So if Walmart's selling auto batteries, we would analyze that from the supply side and then allow the supplier to actually share it with Walmart, right? So it allowed us to get, in theory, more suppliers of Walmart rather than working exclusively, kind of challenging working with, the Walmart buyer may have a lot of turnover. It's kind of challenging in that regard. Whereas if I'm constantly working with the supplier that's been working with Walmart forever, it just works better for us. So the supply side is pretty big for us. I mean, again, that's where most of our clients, it really, like I said, it's about 10,000 seasonal items. So, really anything under the sun. A lot of times you find things that, you would say have no weather relationship, but they do because they're of store traffic component or a commodity perspective, how weather's influencing corn prices or lumber prices, right? I mean, there is a direct relationship from the weather than how those products would sell at retail.
Yeah. And how would you price your services? Is it based on size of the business, number of SKUs? Just trying to get a sense for what your pricing model would look like for the subscription.
My investors would love me to value price, but we don't. We're not going to do that. So everyone pays the same in theory in terms of, retailer, Target's going to pay no more than Walmart. Now, where we do change is just how many categories we analyze. So our system's completely automated. So again, when a client can actually do it themselves, we usually do it for them. Upload their point of sale data for a category, a SKU, doesn't matter. In about 30 seconds, thank you, Amazon, it correlates those sales to past weather. So if they give us 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, however much data they can give, correlates it to past weather by store, then immediately predicts that volume by store in a beautiful planners and thousands of spreadsheets that can go into planning systems, forecasting systems. So all that's completely automated. So again, the neat thing is very scalable. So we don't, typically our fees are anywhere on the low end of $50,000. Sounds like a lot, but it's not when we've got clients that are only maybe a $2-3 million company, but their entire business is a $3 million weather sensitive product,
Right.
right? So if you can move the needle, hundreds of thousands of dollars for them, right? I mean, 50 to 100 grand is not a lot of money. Retailers are, we have the retail side typically in the 100 to 500,000 range a year, but again, it's, I always say it just takes one little simple decision when you're dealing with, hundreds of millions or billion-dollar categories, right? I always joke that Gordy and Tracy Johnston at Walmart, right? They were managing the air conditioner business, the fan business, the fishing business. This is 20, 30 billion dollars worth of product, right? Yeah. And this is, right? That's not, it's bigger than most companies in the world. So again, when you got that much volume, just small changes and adjustments, huge returns.
Yeah. And by the way, I worked for Gordy from 2000 to 2003 before Walmart shipped me off to Japan. And he is and was an unbelievable merchant. I mean, just I learned so much. My claim to fame.
So after the hurricane, right after the hurricane thing, and we helped him with that. And he says, and then the air conditioning, we predicted that year was a funny story. I didn't hear about a real quick story with Gordy, but so Walmart in 2005, we were predicting one of the hottest, driest, longest summers in 10 years, hurricanes in in the South. So Gordy went out and bought like 30% more air conditioners in China. Well, then in May, we said May would be epically cold and snowy, freezing cold May, but then it was going to bottom was going to just go through the roof. June, July, August, September, October, record heat. So Gordy calls me on it's like Mother's Day, I think in May. And I remember the call vividly. He says, "Hey, Captain, are you sure about that hot summer forecast? Because I got a boatload of inventory." And I said, "Gordy, if ever I've given you a statistical guarantee, this is the year." "Thank you, Captain." Well, he went on and he called Home Depot, Lowe's, and Sears and bought all of the domestic supply that year. So he bought another, I don't know, 10, 20, $30 million worth of domestics. They panicked. They had no forward look. They really thought there was no summer that year. So he bought all that in-country supply. Turned out to be one of the hottest summers in history.
And Walmart owned it.
And when he walked 2 years later, we're walking down the hallways of Walmart. He says his pictures and Tracy's pictures were on the top up there, the Walmart, buyers of the year. And I said, "Tracy, you're up there. You're number one." And he says, and he just kind of pats me on the back and says, "All you, Captain, all you." So that was a good year.
Yeah. So this is where I probably show a little bit of my ignorance, but in the context with so many conversations now about climate change, my question to you is simply, has it gotten, based on what you're actually seeing, has it gotten any more difficult for you to predict than it was? Is that a good question?
Yeah, a good question. And it's a hot topic, right? Unfortunately, in climate science, again, there's a little bit of, like everything, right? There's a little bit of hysteria, a little bit of media, a little bit of everything in that regard. Is the climate warmer? Yes. And the unfortunate thing is just kind of the periods in history. Weather history started in 1895. 1895, 126 years ago. That was the end of the Little Ice Age, right? And we had the 16, 17, 1800s, read about George Washington, right? Crossing the Delaware River, right? Those were really cold centuries. But that's the period of record where weather starts. The other unfortunate period is 1975, when we launched our first weather satellite. It was the coldest decade since the Little Ice Age. The 1970s were epically cold and snowy, but that's when we launched our weather satellites. So those 2 points are the starting point. So of course we're warmer than those 2 points. To answer your question, no. I mean, again, I always say, even if you believe the most dire predictions of it's about a degree, every 10 to 20 years, or a tenth of a degree every year. It's a global scale, right? You're talking about 1 degree of change over decades across the world. It's still going to be selling coats in New York and Minneapolis and Bentonville. You're still going to sell batteries and pool supplies next summer in the South. So the year-on-year change where most retailers have to focus, it's not a factor. Now, the one thing that you may see a little bit of, there are certainly you can see a little greater swings, so, we're seeing that some right now in the Pacific Northwest, where you can go from pretty cold, a year ago to record hot this year. So maybe the swing's a little larger, but the problem is that makes it more complicated for retailers to plan. And unfortunately, they're not looking at it, right? If you're not taking in the fact that the Pacific Northwest right now is having the hottest conditions in history right now, 126 years at least, you got to pull that out for next year, right? So next year, June, you can't expect those same sales because the odds of that are maybe very, very low, right? So somehow you got to take that out. And that's what we try to do, is take that piece out. And now what do we see? Now, next year may be very hot, just probably not as hot as this year.
So I'd like to spend the next, handful of minutes just maybe getting to know you a little bit better. I mean, I think you're a fascinating guy, fascinating business, but if you weren't doing this, what else would you be doing? I mean, you've started, businesses, and obviously you're very passionate about what you do. But if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
Well, I have a 5-year-old, so I'm chasing my little girl around all the time. I know you know how
Yeah.
that goes, right?
Yes.
um, you know, I don't know. I always had two passions in Hawaii. I loved landscape architecture, designing things outside, and I loved weather. I don't know. I just think we all have a purpose. I
Mm,
believe, and that
for sure.
while I never really envisioned meteorology becoming a career, if you asked me that in college, okay, I guess I'll get my degree in meteorology because the Air Force needs those. Didn't really think of it ever as growing up. It would be a lifelong career. I didn't even know how it would be, other than the weather service or an AccuWeather, right? There really wasn't a lot of weather options. I don't know. I don't know that at this point, if hindsight's 2020, but I think this is, like I said, I was a Bible scholar, straight A student out of high school, awesome grades in college. And yet I got, on a waiting list for Wheaton College in Illinois to become a minister. And it just was, I was very upset and very bitter when how am I on a waiting list? My dad's an alma mater here. He gives a ton of money to this school. And yet I'm on a waiting list. What did I do wrong? I was very angry to some extent as a young, about to go to college. And on that trip, we actually find out that I have a cousin, my long lost cousin relative, that's a oceanographer physicist at Rutgers University. I didn't even know what Rutgers was. So we actually drove from Illinois all the way back to Rutgers, and this is August, or July or August. And I wasn't going to college. I was very upset about that, straight A student out of high school. And it's pretty devastating, and then he says, look, we can't get you into Rutgers. It's too late, he says, but I'll put you in the night school. You can take a couple classes and I'll transfer you over if you get good grades, transfer you over to the main Rutgers meteorology school. It all worked out, and then the Air Force and Schwarzkopf. I worked for Schwarzkopf for a few months. I just think all those things are meant to be. You have people that are put in your lives at a certain point in time, and maybe unbeknownst to us at the time, is just how significant Walmart put in my life at that time, right? I mean, it really did change the trajectory of our business. If I had just had nothing against them, Johnson & Johnson, Anheuser-Busch, JP Morgan, probably wouldn't be where we were today. So again, I think things happen for a reason. And, I always say to whom much is given, much is expected. So we're very, very generous in that regard with, charitable organizations and whatnot. So I actually like giving away money more, and my investors freak out sometimes about how much we give away, but look, we've been blessed, and I'm going to bless other people.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's great. What have you yet to accomplish in any aspect of your life that keeps you, jumping out of bed in the morning and playing the game hard? You said you've got a 5-year-old. I'm guessing that has to some extent kept you playing hard. But what are some of the other things maybe that you've yet to accomplish that keep you really motivated?
I think motivated and frustrating, right? This is year ahead weather, right? I mean, everybody that might even be listening thinks it's crazy. It's just cognitive distances, right? You're not going to even believe it because it's impossible. And I would tell you, it is impossible with physics. It's completely impossible. Physics is not there. One day physics and the models, and again, these primitive equations that we use in physics we'll eventually get it right, but you're going to need 1,000 Amazons to compute all that data, we're not there yet. So it's frustrating in the regard that we know how we've helped companies. We had the entire Coca-Cola team actually try to re-engineer with their entire Indian staff and offshore staff of PhDs, hundreds of them, trying to re-engineer what we did. They could not figure out how we were predicting. They were having a hard time just finding a correlation between Coke sales and weather, and yet we did. So just the analytics and the thinking of how you predict sales. I mean, you can't just throw sales up and throw the temperature line on there and think you're going to predict, find a correlation to a sales. You're not. There's some nuances in how you look at that data to find the strong relationship, predict the sales. I guess for me, that's the frustration, is just that, we still, much less than it was 15, 20 years ago, but you'll still get, well, I don't believe it. And yeah, you've got all these wonderful, 150 Fortune 1000 clients, but I want to beta test it, right? I mean, you still get a little bit of that, not as much, but that's the challenge, right? It's just, really, I still got to prove yourself year after year after year. And it is, you're only as good as your last forecast, right? So the good news is statistics really hold up. I mean, again, it's not like we ever miss a season, right? I'm not going to tell you it's going to be the coldest, snowiest in 7 years for Q4 and have it be record hot. That's not going to happen in Q4.
You've given us a number of cues throughout the course of this conversation, but I just ask you directly, how do you want to be remembered as a human?
Charitable. Again, I believe that, again, like I said, I have no regrets. Again, I could look back on my dad dying at 13 and saying, wow, that I should be very angry about that, or all kinds of things you could look back on your life and say, your daughter, I mean, I know it struggles you're going through. I can't even comprehend what you've gone through, yet you're getting through it, right? I mean, those hurdles that we go through in life, I think shape who we are, and so I think the things that impacted my life along the way, and there were definitely some hurdles in the younger years, but I'm not bitter. I'm generous. I think for me, I feel very good when someone, pastor of our church calls in a panic because their air conditioner failed. And I'm like, well, how much does an air conditioner cost at a church? Well, I was a little shocked when he said $75,000, but we step in and we make that happen. So I'm blessed. And, like I said, maybe investors think I'm a little too generous, but again, the more you do, I think it comes back to you constantly. It's just whatever you believe. I see it firsthand that the more good you do, it just kind of follows you, right? So I'm hoping that's that he was extremely generous, kind-hearted, and that's just for me. And we have that in our business. It's our character in our business. I think you see that, and that's what people tell you about Weather Trends is just that they're a great company to work with. They jump through hoops, they bend over backwards, and that's instilled through the employees. I mean, we say employees, they're family. I mean, all of them. So I would say that's about it.
All right. Well, Bill Kirk, co-founder and CEO of Weather Trends International. This has been a fascinating conversation for me, who knew, as it turns out, absolutely nothing about you or your business. And I appreciate the generosity that you've shown in offering up this time to share with us. And I look forward to getting to know you and your organization better in the years to come. Thank you so much.
All righty. Thank you, Matt. Happy to help.
Have a great day.